The Dallas Famous podcast is supported by the Mullen & Mullen Music Project. The Music Project was created by Mullen & Mullen Injury Law Firm to champion the independent music scene in North Texas. Hey there, it's Andrew, and we're back on Dallas Famous Podcast Extras. We've got director Timothy Stevens, who's here to discuss his documentary, Dark Sanctuary, The Story of the Church, which delves into the rich history of the iconic goth night at the church and its pivotal role in Dallas's music scene. Through his lens, he captures the emotional essence of a community that found solace and acceptance in a unique cultural haven. In our conversation, we talk about Timothy's journey into filmmaking, the inspiration behind Dark Sanctuary, and the significance of the church as a gathering place for those on the fringes of society. Join us as we delve into the transformative power of music and community, and unearth the stories that shaped this unforgettable era in Dallas's nightlife. Hello, we are back at the Deep Ellum Community Center. I've got director, documentarian Timothy Stevens today. How you doing?
Doing great, and despite finding the traffic from Denton, I'm doing all right.
Oh, you came from Denton?
I did. I'm a Dentonite, man.
Oh, okay, yeah. Man. You're not the first, and I do love. In fact, before I lived in the area, I was like, oh my god, I wish I was grew up in Denton. Just because of the artistic scene there was so cool.
Right, which is why I'm there.
Yeah,
for sure.
Is that where are you from originally?
Amarillo.
Amarillo, okay.
Yeah, so I'm still a Texas guy, but
sure.
I always say that if I had to choose a place in Texas that I had to stay, I would say Denton, because it's got all the vibes, and it's it's not what it was in the 90s, but it's still pretty cool.
Right. Did you go to Denton because of UNT?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I went there for film school.
Okay. Well, let's start a little bit before that.
Sure.
Well, actually, at the front, let's just say that you made the documentary
Dark Sanctuary, The Story of the Church.
Okay.
Yes. And it's a feature documentary primarily about the goth night at the famous Deep Ellum Club, the church, which, as some of you might know, was also, some people know it more so as the Lizard Lounge, which was the EDM nights, the techno nights. But I chose to kind of focus on the goth thing because my own personal interest, but also I think there's just a really deep story there, which we can get into.
Yeah. Wait, so this because I literally missed that whole scene. I didn't grow up here. I think I made it there one time before it closed. But so the church was one night at Lizard Lounge. Is that what it was?
Yeah. So over the years the lounge was open on different days of the week, right? But primarily it was Friday, Saturday was the techno nights, and they were really. We talk about this a lot in the documentary. I actually dedicate a whole sequence to talking about the importance of Lizard Lounge to, not just Dallas, but just the EDM scene broadly.
Okay, so
right, because in the 90s, nobody booked these DJs. You listened to it, and they were played at raves, but no one thought to bring Paul Van Dyke or. I don't know, Tiesto or some of these big names. They just didn't think they were bookable people. And the people, and Don Nedler, who's the owner, which you'll see in the documentary, he really saw that there was a want to see these people, and he was, the first in Dallas, but I would argue the first, even more broadly, in the U.S. to really start thinking about these people as acts that we want to bring in, and that really made Dallas like a hub for electronic music, to the point where you had just the biggest names at the time in electronic dance music and techno and rave coming to Dallas because they're like, oh, hey, they want to book me. That's great. I'm not just going to be in the studio. And this was before the big wave of seeing a lot of these people playing sold out, festivals and that sort of thing. It was just a couple of less than a mile over to
really
to the lounge. Yeah, it was all here. And then on Sunday nights they did the church, which was a goth night.
Okay.
And that's really where the community formed. Ravers, they're kind of transient. They come and they go, and they may not even remember who they hung out with that night, right? So it's hard for a community sometimes to form in like a raver situation. Not that it doesn't happen, because it does. But the goth people, like, they're desperate for friends and community, and so when a place opened up of that scale, in that opulence in Dallas, the goth community just swarmed upon it, and real family formed, which has been transformational for the people that were involved and are involved. Which is why I decided to make the documentary, because that I mean, as like, I don't know if you're like me, I'm a weirdo and an outsider. When I find a group of other weirdos and outsiders, it does a lot for me personally, because I'm like, finally, I belong. Like, I can breathe.
Sure.
And that's what it did for Dallas.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's blowing my mind, because I will admit I didn't do the research to like realize that it was like a hub of all of this at one point before, I mean, now it's commonplace silo. There's like lots of places for like EDM. Let's take a pause on that and go to your story a little bit.
Sure.
So, like, first of all, like, what was there like a moment in your childhood where you're like, I want to tell stories, I want to do film, or what was it for you that started it?
Totally. I mean, despite the fact that I've actually made now more feature documentaries than I have narrative films, something with a script and
Sure.
Fictional, I still kind of think of myself in that lens. And from the beginning, so my mom, she's a retired professional photographer. And in college, she took several film classes, and most of it was like film appreciation and that sort of thing. And so as a kid, as like I was probably 10, she introduced me to films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or Nosferatu, or these old German expressionist films, classic.
Gee, I wonder where you got your goth aesthetic from.
Dude, it was The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 100%. So two things happened whenever I saw that film. I was introduced to a dark aesthetic, which I just kind of sort of unconsciously adopted. And then the other thing is that I, being raised on like the classic Disney era, I never really thought of movies as being like art. I kind of thought of those as separate things. But then I saw that film, and I saw other films like The Golem and Nosferatu especially, and it occurred to me like, oh, wow, this is art.
So at 10, you had like made this distinction between Disney is like fluff and this is substantial.
There's something here that the filmmakers themselves are trying to say something.
Okay.
And that led me to like classic Gothic literature. So I became really interested in classic Victorian Gothic literature like Dracula or Frankenstein or The Picture of Dorian Gray, which led me again to deeper interest in I would say kind of art house filmmaking. Like if you had asked me in high school what kind of filmmaker I wanted to be, I would have said I wanted to make stuff like Jean Cocteau, these French, new wave avant-garde filmmakers. And then I discovered that there's no money in that, unfortunately. No one pays you to make avant-garde cinema.
Shocking.
Yeah. But, there's all this stuff kind of combined. So, I've made several horror projects. I've written a lot more than I've actually made. And then, it seemed only natural because whenever I came here in 2009 to 2010, the first like thing I did outside of going to class was I went to a concert at the Lounge, and it was actually this band called the Gorehounds, which are a Cramps cover band, I believe, and they may still be playing.
I've heard of them. I think they might still be.
Yeah. And so that was not like a club night, but I came into this opulent space, and then I saw other, darkly clad individuals, and coming from a small town, I had never seen anybody like that besides me and like my one or two friends that were also like that. So it all kind of, collided together, and, I never thought about making a film until the church shut down. And then that's when it kind of occurred to me that, hey, there's a story here that really needs to be told.
But you made other films before? This was not your first film?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've a dozen or so short films.
Okay. This is the first feature length?
Third.
Okay.
Feature length. So I did a documentary in 2016 16, and then a narrative feature film in 2020.
Okay.
And produced a few in that space as well. And then we started working on Dark Sanctuary.
Okay, so you found where the Lizard Lounge basically from that cover band, basically.
Yeah, the Gorehounds. Yeah, because I just asked somebody, I was like, hey, like, what is this space? Because, it didn't look like a typical venue. Like, it looked like you're walking into... had cathedral-esque qualities, thus the name, the church, right? And someone told me, like, hey, you should come back on Sunday. And I was probably a couple of months before I actually made it down to a club night. And then, the rest is history. I was swept up in the whirlwind that is that scene here in Dallas. And I actually met other filmmakers as a result of it. I met Billy Blair, which I don't know if you've ever talked to him, but he's a local actor. He's been in a bunch of Robert Rodriguez films.
Oh.
He's in the second Sin City and all of the Machete films.
Okay.
And he was just like, one of the first times I went, he was just hanging out on a couch, and this guy looked like Edgar Allan Poe, and I went up and talked to him, and he became the lead in my first narrative feature film.
Oh, cool.
As well. So, it's this weird things. I'm sure you've experienced this as well, where it's like you get in the right crowd and suddenly doors open. And
oh yeah.
It just, you can't imagine what your life would have been like had this singular moment not occurred. You know?
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of astounding though that this particular night like kind of has its own life. I mean, your film is something that gives it to other people that weren't there to experience it, which is cool. But okay, I have not seen the documentary yet. I apologize. But I know that we have DJ Virus that did the music, and he was a big part of that scene in the movie.
Yes, yeah. So Joe Virus started going there from the beginning. Really, I mean, he was going there when it was the Lounge. He was really young at the time. So it was like 92, 93. Okay. And then around 94 is when they started doing Sunday nights, the church. And so he was there on day one, as far as I know. And there's so many people that went to the church, the thousands, right? And a lot of those people are still, I would say in the hundreds, are people that are still going every night, and they were there there's some dude that has been going every night and he hasn't missed a beat in 30 years.
Wow.
Which is insane, right?
Yeah.
So, there's so many people I talked to, and, the first person I talked to was Joe, because I was kind of familiar with him. I'd done some short film screenings, premieres actually at the church.
Oh.
And he was my sound guy. So he was the guy that was like making sure that everything was like balanced and everything. So I talked to him, and he kind of became the doorway for me into like all that history I didn't know, because it's like you go there and you dance and you have a good time and you hear rumors about the infamous things that happened. But you don't really know until you know. And we ended up interviewing him first, and I think I have almost 9 hours of interviews with him, because the guy's a storyteller, so he just told me everything.
Yeah.
And I turned that into more or less like a Bible. I transcribed it and turned it into a Bible, and that became my like marching orders for the film. And it told me who else to talk to, and I kind of spider-webbed out from there. But the effect was he kind of becomes like the main character. He's like he's our hero, because like I said, I'm a filmmaker, and I write a lot of scripts, and I believe even a documentary needs like a hero and someone to follow. And the best documentaries do have heroes, even if they're historical in nature. So, and happens to be like a super talented like composer and synth guy. He's a big synth nerd. So it was also a no-brainer for doing the soundtrack to the film.
Sure. So I'm sure this is covered, but like the time between people are going to this venue to we're doing a goth night, like what was the evolution to that point?
Yeah, so it was a venue of various types, probably since like the 20s, I would imagine. There's kind of an unverified time, right, when we're not sure. There's rumors that there was like a speakeasy and that sort of thing. And then it became a dinner theater in the 70s called the Grand Crystal Palace. And there's actually some really cool video, some film footage that we found through the archives at SMU of what it looked like in the 70s. And ironically enough, it doesn't look that different. Like what it looked like is this kind of like kitschy 70s dinner theater. It's just kind of blackened is what it became as a club, right?
Right.
And then it was a strip club for a while. And then in the 80s, it was this club called Empire. In Empire, funnily enough, and there's not a lot of documentation on this, like a few flyers here and there, a handful of photographs, was like, I mean, it's hard to call it a goth club, but it kind of was because there was a lot of bands that were using that moniker, but they were playing at Empire, like Clan of Zymox. And we actually found like Jeff K from famous DJ here in Dallas. His wife took photographs of the sound check of Clan of Zymox playing at Empire in 1988. And as far as I know, is some of the oldest photographs of that space in existence that we were able to show.
Wow.
But, Zymox, talk to any goth, they're the like epitome of dark wave.
Okay.
To this day, right? And they were playing there. So I would say it was kind of there from the beginning. And then in 92, 93, that's when it became the Lizard Lounge, and then it was 2 or 3 years later they started doing the goth night.
Was there just so many goths that like what was it? I mean, you weren't there before that, but like the people you talked to, like, was it like, okay, we're playing for an hour of this type of music, now we're gonna have a couple goth songs and then we're gonna move back to some other genre? Like, what was it that made the goths want to be in that situation, I guess? Sure.
Well, lack of anywhere else, right? And we talk about it in the documentary, but Don Nedler, the owner of the lounge, what he did is he's an entrepreneur. So he actually had Lizard Lounges in Houston, and he also very briefly had one in Florida.
Oh.
And while he was trying to get that one off the ground in Florida, he went to a goth night there that was on Sunday nights, and they actually called it the church. And it was a bit of a joke, on a Sunday night,
right.
Your mom asked, "Oh, I'm going to the church. Don't worry about me," And they were playing some darker stuff, but they would also mix it in with like 80s retro and new wave and that sort of thing. But there was something about that night, and particularly the darker sound, that was really inspiring to Don. And he realized that there was like something there, and he asked permission to like, hey, can I, it wasn't really even like a trademark thing. It was just like, hey, can I take kind of what you're doing and like do it in Dallas in a little bit different? And they're like, sure, whatever. And so he did, but he really focused it in on that dark sound. And, there was Bauhaus, there was The Cure, but then you also had bands like Skinny Puppy and a Clan of Zymox, and this emerging genre of what we would know as like dark wave and goth rock. And,
can you tell me like what you would define the difference between goth and dark wave? Is that a split?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so what I would say is like dark wave is goth, right? But not all goth is dark wave.
Okay.
Goth is kind of like an umbrella term, that
Sure.
you could fit like goth rock under that, like Typo Negative or something like that. But then dark wave tends to have a lot of electronic elements to it, but it tends to be very dreary and, kind of downbeat, although not all dark wave. Sometimes it gets pretty dancy, so there's not, that's kind of splitting hairs there,
Sure. Yeah.
but the thing is that in that, late 80s, early 90s, there was that, that new wave, that distillation of like club music, and, the darker stuff didn't really have, at least in Dallas, there was only little pockets of like random monthly, for lack of a better term, almost like warehouse type raves where they were doing, stuff that was all that, right? And so the community was there, but they were like hungry for, that in regular rotation. So when Don, thought like, I'm going to try this, it's probably going to fail. We'll do it a couple of times. And if no one comes, we'll just go back to a regular Lizard Lounge night. And it only took 2 or 3 times before, like moths to the flame. Right.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
word got out that, hey, there's like a nightly club, and it's in this space that, really has that kind of like, aesthetic opulence that goths really like, because like a raver doesn't care, they'll dance in a sewer drain if that's all there is, right?
Sure.
But a goth wants velvet, and they want plush leather, and they want ambiance and that sort of thing, and that's what the club, it was a dinner theater before it, so it had that kind of like preset gothic feel to it. It's all you had to do is like change the color of the lights and switch out some of the pink for some black and red, and suddenly it's like a pre-made vampire club basically.
Well, so you were a attendee of the church for a number of years.
Oh, I mean, probably a decade almost before even it crossed my mind that we could make a movie.
What made you think I'm the guy to make the documentary about this?
It's a great question. I really got into. I mean, my day-to-day, like what pays the bills are documentary, right? It's easier to get documentary style off the ground. It's cheaper. There's a lot more of that happening in Dallas, so I was getting hired to do a lot of that kind of thing. So
wait, you're getting hired to like do like what exactly?
Like documentary TV and that sort of thing.
I see. Okay.
Or like corporate stuff that has the look and feel of a documentary.
Okay, gotcha.
So I knew that process really well, but I never really thought of myself as like a documentary filmmaker. And during the pandemic, I just got really into watching documentaries, and I watched the Studio 54 doc, which I think it's on Amazon, could be Netflix, but it's a really good film.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was about, that infamous club in New York that was only around for like, what, two years, maybe 2 or 3 years.
So wild how much of an impression made in just 2 years.
Yeah, incredible. And it became this like haven, and this getaway for alternative cultures in that time, right? But more than that, it also brought in, like a new era of electronic music, and, celebrities hung out there, and it was there and gone, but we're still talking about it. And I remember watching the film and thinking like, man, this reminds me of the church. Not that I want to make a film about the church, but just that, like I said, I knew rumors about the significance of that club, not the full story, but I knew rumors. And I just had this kind of gut feeling that like the church and the Lizard Lounge is in the same echelon as Studio 54, but against all reason, it has been around for almost 30 years. And that's atypical.
It's incredible for anything, really. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like if you look around here in Deep Ellum, like there's very few clubs that stick around for more than 5
Sons of
years.
Herman Hall is all I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah. I mean, the Door, but they're not even around.
No, the Door's
anymore,
not around. I mean,
yeah. So yeah, just very few. And even Sons of Herman Hall is like they've changed hands kind of. And, it's not been the same thing in its entire existence.
Sure,
right?
sure.
Even though it's been around a long time. But the lounge has been the lounge since 91, right? So crazy. And so, a couple of months pass, and we're still on lockdown, and I see a Facebook post. And it was from Don Nedler, who I kind of come to know a little bit because I'd produced some events along with other people there. And he was sharing, like a picture of a Penske truck outside of, was that the right word? He was sharing a picture of a moving truck outside of the lounge, and this message that, and I didn't even know how much of this had been going on, that he had been paying rent and the salaries of all his employees out of his own pocket for months, hoping that things would either open back up, or that the people whom he was paying the lease to, like the rental, would relent a little bit and maybe cut him a break, and it just became too much. And so he was like, our last night was this past week. Next week we have to pull all of our shit out. And
God, that must have been devastating.
Yeah, and he said, like, listen, I know this is so important to everybody, so we're going to set a night where everyone can come out masked up and take a tour. And it was essentially a funeral for the church.
Oh, God.
In the lounge. And it was like maybe a day or two later, actually a guy that I know because he used to cut my hair called me up, and he's like, hey, Timothy, I know you're a filmmaker, right? I don't know if you make documentaries, but someone's got to make a documentary about the church. And I was like, yeah, like someone has to do that. And I kind of just got the feeling that like if someone else didn't do it, well, if I didn't do it, someone else would. And by this time, I was seeing that kind of outpour of love that was coming from these people where it was very clear that it was not just a club. Like if my favorite restaurant on the square in Denton closed, I might feel a little bummed, but I don't cry. Mm-hmm. I don't make a Facebook post about it. I don't schedule events for public mourning about it. And that's what was happening. And I realized that there's something really significant going on here. And it probably related to that community that I spoke of, to where the prime years of their life spent in this space. And, people meet their husbands, they meet their wives, their girlfriends, they meet their friends. There's a whole group of people. We dedicate a portion of the film in this that goths are. I wouldn't say predisposed to depression, but a lot of them deal with a lot of mental health challenges, and there's. Literally hundreds of people that just did not survive that early 90s scene. Mm-hmm. But for this brief period of time, they had, a community that held their hand, maybe in the, in the final, years and months of their lives. And in that, I think I began to realize that that's what was beneath the surface here, and that's why there's such a feeling of loss about this space, because it was the space that held all these stories. And so I was like, his name is Austin, and he actually became the co-producer of the film. And I was like, Austin, you're right. What do we do? And he was like, we need to talk to Don. And so we did, and we got the goth father's blessing, and started making the movie. And that's kind of how it worked.
When was that? When did you start actually making
2021,
okay.
Late 2021, and we really didn't start filming in earnest until early 2022. Mm-hmm. I think we had done maybe 2 or 3 interviews that year. And then we really hit it hard, and worked on it for almost 2 years actually before it was done. Documentaries are nothing like a narrative feature film. A narrative film I can have done in a couple of months. Yeah. More or less. But this kind of became my creative existence for years and years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're living in it.
Totally. And and it takes that's a whole different podcast talking about the emotional toll that making a documentary takes on you.
Absolutely.
Especially when you care about it, when you care so much about the story.
Yeah, I'm looking at my notes because I want to be sure I don't miss anything. And
sure.
Something that we deal with in Deep Ellum since it started was the impact of gentrification. And I know that you talk about that in doc. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit? We
do, yeah. So, it's no secret that Westdale owns a big swath of Deep Ellum, and they keep getting more. Over the years, there was independent owners of 2424 Swiss, and eventually they sold out to Westdale, and then Westdale became the person, the entity that the lounge had to deal with, and ultimately, Westdale, was happy as long as the rent could be paid. So they were not necessarily looking to push the lounge out. But there was a lot of other existential pressures, such as Uber and the Epic project that was coming up literally right across the street from that. And I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but I know that there was like pressure to turn the lounge into parking and or high rises, for Uber. That never worked out, but what it did is that it raised the property value exponentially, and it that along with a certain amount of inflexibility coming from said corporate entity that I just mentioned led to the downfall. We saw this all over the U.S., but especially in Dallas, where these big corporations, they didn't need that extra profit. They could have showed some mercy, right? And we might still have the lounge. I might never have made the documentary, right?
Sure.
Because we've it would still be happening in that space, or maybe I would have eventually, but I think is an unfortunate reality happening here. And it's not the sole reason the lounge, obviously COVID played a huge role in that, but it's a huge contributing factor, and it's I'm sure y'all talk all the time about how the cultural soul of Deep Ellum and Dallas more broadly is getting, sucked by the vampires of corporate America.
We don't talk about it a lot, but it definitely comes up from time to time. And we don't say it like that, but it's true. I mean, that's like these venues can't survive when it you only make X amount a night at a venue, and you just can't survive when the rent's that high, so.
Yeah, and it just became tough, when you're not allowed to open a bar for 6 months,
Sure.
that's unless your landlord will say, hey, I'll cut you a break and you can pay me back later, which again, you can do anything if you want, they chose not to.
Sure.
And the result was the club closing.
Yeah.
And I mean, the good thing is that the community, was more than a building. It is more than a building. So they've been able to survive, and we narrate this transition that they make to the It'll Do Club.
So that's the new spot.
That's the new spot. Yeah. So basically, all the acts and all the DJs and even the techno stuff is really just moved over to It'll Do. It doesn't have the scale it used to, and they can't do a lot of the same things. It's hard to hold big theatrical performances in that space because there's not really a stage.
Sure.
But in the end, it's always just been a dance club, and it's still happening over there. So it could have been ultra devastating, and the good thing is that the community has been able to kind of make that transition, and the church lives.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, I'm not in that scene personally, although I grew up in the 80s and I love a lot of that music.
Yeah.
But I was aware that it didn't die just because the building died. But maybe let's talk about that community and what that community kind of means to the city, to you, on its own, not in any building specifically.
Yeah. Goths are and I speak this not as an outsider, as one of them. We're rather sensitive lot, right? We have big feelings, and we think about things, and maybe through a slightly dark tinted lens and perspective. And we're just kind of it was born out of punk, right? It came out of 70s, and and you had bands that really did cross the line between goth and punk. I'm thinking The Damned and stuff like that. And so that rebel spirit is there, and that refusal to conform. But what that does in a place like Dallas is, especially in the 80s, and maybe a little bit more so in the 70s, but in the 80s, and even today to some degree, there's this conservative undercurrent, and and so the parents of these people, that were coming of age in the late 80s to early 90s, frowned a lot on it, and there was a new wave of satanic panic that was going on at the time, and and then you had Columbine, and and now you're thought of as being dangerous too. So not only am I just like a Satanist, and I'm like not a good little Christian boy, but I might be like packing a gun under my trench coat, right? Like that's that was the zeitgeist back then, and so that pushes people to the exterior, and they start to believe that they are. That they don't belong. And so when a place comes around like the church and provides, this like space where these people can find other like-minded individuals, I'm not a psychologist, but, I spend a lot of time thinking about these things, like what that does for you as a person is invaluable, right? And, they call the church as a joke, kind of, it was almost like, again, you could tell your parents, I'm going to the church, and they would be
right.
like, oh, that's nice, honey. And maybe you could leave.
Why
the
are
house.
You dressed like that?
Well, what people would do is that they would dress normal, and then they would go change like in the bathroom.
Oh, that's
or in the cab or in the car.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of that. And they had to hide it, but these people are also gay. They're also trans, they're also, just generally, people that just aren't fitting nice, neat little labels.
Sure.
And what that does for you as a person is incredible, and in a lot of cases, in the people we interviewed for the film, the existence of the church became more like a church than any church ever could have been for them, because they really did find that place of like radical acceptance, and like forgiveness isn't even in the picture. Like, I don't need to forgive you for anything. Like, it's just who you are is cool. I don't care.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never looked at it specifically like that, but it really explains the bond. I mean, the venue itself was just the meeting place in a lot of sense.
Right.
I mean, but it's the bond of like, it's like the Island of Misfit Toys, and we're all in this together.
And they use that. Like, people always, they talk about it's the Island of Misfits.
Okay,
I think that's literally a line in the documentary that someone says.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think to me, that was why I really wanted to make the documentary, because, you could have told the story of the church in the lounge and talked about the fact that the Cure hung out there, right?
Really?
Just for fun, or that Marilyn Manson hung out there for fun, or that who's the other guy? The dude from Nine Inch Nails.
Trent
Reznor hung out there, so it had that Studio 54 attraction because people would hear rumors about the lounge and the church, and when celebrities would come through, they would ask like, hey, where should I hang out tonight? And everyone said, you should go to the lounge, goth or not. People came to the church to just see this, anomaly. So, you could have told a version of the documentary that was all that, and it would have been okay. It would have been fun and exciting, but it would have missed what I think was the most important part.
It sounds like that was like frosting at best. The celebrity
I mean,
aspect.
that just makes it cool, the meat of the story is what I just told
Absolutely.
you. But of course we have lots of scenes in the film where we talk about the what it meant to bring in this kind of celebrity element.
Did you ever personally bump into somewhere like, oh my God, there they are right there?
Yes, I did. Actually, this is a really funny story. I was hanging out at the church one night. It wasn't a busy night. Or maybe it was just early in the night, because it really picked up around like 10 to midnight, so I was there early. And I was at the bar, and it was a really big space, but the music was turned down low because it was still early in the night. And I hear this drunk guy mumbling down on the edge of the bar, and I look over, and he's surrounded by these beautiful goth chicks, that all look like, we would call them like influencer model types, but they were probably like alt models,
Sure.
And they're all fawning over him. And I look at him really hard. I was like, I know this guy, but he's not somebody I would necessarily recognize for his face. And then I start listening to him talking. He's talking about the decline of Detroit and how he misses Detroit in the good old days and what a shithole it's become. And then I realized that it's James O'Barr, who is the original comic book author of The Crow.
Oh, wow.
And, and also, he became really good friends with Brandon Lee. You know, and he's a dude that's severely, from everything I've read, severely devastated by his death. And he's a depressed guy, and he's a goth. And he's just like plastered, hanging out, in, you know, surrounded by this, you know, cohort of pretty goth women that are all listening to him commiserate about that. And so, yeah, that was just one story, you know, particularly funny story, honestly, because I don't think he realized, like, you know, that people would figure out who he was.
Oh, yeah.
You know? Yeah, I mean, all kinds of people, like Madonna has been spotted several times. She actually considered buying the club at one point. And she got together with Dennis Rodman, and they actually did raise a lot of the capital to buy it, and the deal never went through. But there was plans at one point for them to take over the space. And I mean, who knows what they would have done with the club.
Hard to imagine that.
It would have been insane. But yeah, she was there, and you know, there was a episode of Walker, Texas Ranger that was filmed there, and also the music video for Joan Jett's "Pretty Little Liar." Was shot there in the 80s.
Wow.
So you can go check that out if you look up Pretty Little Liar, Joan Jett. It's literally just entirely shot in the interior of what would have been, I assume, the Empire Club at that point.
Right.
You know, so it had this mystique, and especially when it became, you know, this renowned club, you know, it's people, you know, like, as far as I know, people like Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie, like, you know, they're looking for like a chill place to go after playing Ozfest or whatever, you know, they came to the lounge. And especially if it was a Sunday, you know, because they can kind of like slink into the shadows and maybe not be noticed.
Not stand out. Yeah. So you got to premiere this at the Dallas International Film Festival, yes?
We did. Yeah, that was incredible.
Yeah. Like what was that like? Like how did that all happen and go for you?
It was great. You know, I've been trying for years to get into Dallas International Film Festival. It's rather prestigious, actually.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things you don't think about Dallas having such a influence more broadly on like music and art and movies, but it really does. And, you know, that's just a hard one, whether you're from the area or not, to get into.
Yeah.
Maybe even harder if you're from the area.
I think probably, yeah.
You know, and so, yeah, we submitted and got in, and that was our premiere. And that was really incredible. And the cool thing though is that, you know, I think we were one of maybe two films to completely sell out. And we were in the biggest theater. And it's because the people that remember going to the club, you know, whether they're part of the goth scene or not, you know, we were able to get some news stories out there on WFA and some other places, and, you know, the word got out. And it was actually standing room on that screening. And we ended up doing a cast and crew only screening at the Texas Theater a couple of months before that. And that to me was probably the most like gratifying moment, because what happened was we did an Indiegogo campaign, and I was just going to do it for those people that contributed, plus those we interviewed. But the outpour of interest was so incredible that we ended up moving the screening from the smaller theater upstairs in the mezzanine theater at the Texas Theater into the main stage. And again, we sold out the place. Like the fire marshal would not have let more people into that. And they were solely the people that were a part of that community. And so you can imagine like the stakes for me were like very high. I was like, they're either going to run me out with pitchforks or it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
And I almost walked out to the bar at one point just because the atmosphere was so charged. You know, like there's something like really almost metaphysical happening there just because people cared so much. And as a filmmaker, you don't get that opportunity very often for people to watch your film and for it to mean so much. And afterwards, just the reaction was overwhelming.
Yeah.
And
I wish
so,
I would have
like,
seen it in that environment now that you say
yeah,
that.
I mean, Dallas International, that was okay. It was fun, but that screening just for the community, which was 600 people, was insane.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
And great. And again, like, it's like if they had hated it, I probably wouldn't be living here because they probably would have run me out of town, but they loved it. And it was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now where can people see the film?
Dark Sanctuary, for a while, has actually been out on DVD and Blu-ray. So we were able to collaborate with, actually, they used to be primarily known as a goth music label, Cleopatra Records.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah. And but in recent, like the past 7 or 8 years, they've expanded into films. So really we can, imagine a more perfect partner. And because of their kind of legacy of like physical media, they gave us a really awesome physical release. So it's been available now for months out on DVD and Blu-ray. And you can get that either on Amazon Prime or you can get it straight from CleopatraRex.com with special features on the Blu-ray, which I strongly suggest you get that because we have some cool stories from celebrities like Kevin Key from Skinny Puppy that we weren't able to include in the main film that you'll only see on the Blu-ray. Along with a music video that we produced along with Joe Virus for the credit soundtrack, You Belong in the Night. So we put the music video on there as well. So cool features. But now, currently, it is streaming everywhere. So pretty much anywhere you look for films, like short of Netflix, you're going to find Dark Sanctuary, Story of the Church. So like Amazon Prime, Google Play, Apple TV. Eventually, it's going to come out on places like advertise-based stuff like Tubi. So pretty soon you'll be able to see it on Tubi, and that'll be a great way. I obviously recommend that you either get the Blu-ray or you watch it on like Amazon Prime or something like that, so you don't have to worry about ads. Because nothing pisses me off more than like a Dove commercial coming up over like a really intense scene.
And they never cut him in the right spot either.
Ever, yeah. But I'm happy for people to just watch it wherever, because it's I believe from the beginning that this was a story that, I needed to make for more than just Dallas, right? If it had been just for Dallas, I might have made a short film or something. But I believe, like almost that like cultural example of like, hey, just here's a good way to be kind to each other. And this little place in Dallas did it right, and they're still doing it right. Like, to me, that combined with just the epic proportions of like the musical influence of this space on electronic music and and goth and that sort of thing makes it worthy of a film. And for anybody anywhere, you've never heard The Church, like I think you'll find this interesting, whether you're a goth or not, whether you even care to listen to electronic music. The cultural influence is really important.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think I clocked that, and I'm extremely excited to watch it now that I know that. I was going to watch it anyway, but that's fascinating to me. I didn't realize that we were such a hub in that sense. Are you kind of done promoting this? Are you on to the next thing yet? What's going on with you now?
Well, promotion never ends.
Sure. Well, you're here now. I don't know why I just asked that question. It's stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm still promoting, a film that I made 3 years ago. So, it never stops. But yeah, I mean, I'm always looking for the next thing. I mean, I'm particularly passionate about period horror films. If someone would give me the kind of budget Robert Eggers gets for films like Nosferatu and The Witch and The Lighthouse and whatnot, I would be doing what he does.
Gotcha.
And I almost feel like I've been into it before Robert Eggers was on the scene, because my first folk horror, or film that's like a period horror film, I wrote, probably 15 years ago. But I've never been quite able to raise the budget for it because I don't believe in cheap films. Like you see some cheap like Westerns and period films and you see a zipper and go, oh,
yeah.
Like that just takes me out of it. So, that's really what I'm focused on right now. Is I have several scripts that, they need some cash to move them forward, but it's like I said, even though I made more documentary stuff than I have narrative stuff, I still kind of think of myself more as like a narrative filmmaker.
Interesting.
I certainly spend more time writing that, you know.
I mean, I would think this success of this could help you get some interest. Yes, maybe.
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, you never know. You know, it's there's no clear line to success in independent filmmaking
Or any of this art stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just most of the people I know that have been successful, they're either born into like that world.
Coppola.
Yeah, you know, and it's like Sofia Coppola is a great filmmaker, but you know, she says, "Daddy, can I make a film?"
Yeah.
And it works because she's in that world.
Mm-hmm.
Great. You know, and I think that's awesome. I'm just not a part of that. You know, I'm, you know, middle class Texas. Right? So, you know, the other people that I know, and these are the people that really work their ass off to get their films made, you know, do it because they just keep putting themselves out there, and they meet the person that helps them meet the person to meet the other person that somehow it all falls into place. So I haven't discovered that secret formula yet, but you know, I will say that I've come into contact with the interview after we interviewed Paul Oakenfold, the famous trance DJ. After we were done with that, like I was sitting with my camera operator and we were getting supper at Velvet Taco, and I was like, can you believe we're doing this? Like, that's wild. Like, this is really fucking wild that this is our life at the moment, you know? And so I kind of live for that, you know, is just man, like I could be like every other loser sitting at home and like looking at Facebook and, you know, maybe playing Red Dead Redemption or something. But we're out here and we're making art and we're meeting, you know, incredible personalities and telling amazing stories. And isn't that brilliant?
Yeah.
Like, I just couldn't ask for more.
I agree.
You know, and so I don't... You know, the success is awesome if we get it, you know, but just being able to, the privilege to be able to do that is enough most of the time, you know?
Absolutely. Hey, Timothy, this is exciting. I'm glad you did this. I'm sure a lot of people are happy this is out to tell this story. And I'm glad it's still continuing in a new space. So thanks for reaching out to me. We wish you a lot of success. We will have links to everything in the show notes. If you want to shout anything out now, though, you can do that too. Yeah,
sure. So, you know, I believe in like creating like homepages where you can just go and see everything. So darksanctuarythemovie.com has links to just every single place that you could possibly either purchase or watch or stream the film. If we happen to have additional screenings, which I want to, you know, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we go back to the Texas Theater at some point or other venues around. We'll post the calendar there. And then more broadly, my studio is called Spectrograph Films. Spectro, SPECTRO, Spectrograph is like a weird scientific instrument for measuring light of distant planets. So I just like the name.
Cool.
Spectrographfilms.com has links to all of our other movies, like my first narrative feature, a kung fu. So we have a sci-fi horror called The Ghost Lights, and then we have a kung fu comedy called Dead Hand that has a lot of influence of like early Chinese martial arts, plus like quite a bit of John Wick. I produced that film. You can check that out there, and then whatever else I happen to be cooking up, you'll be able to find there as well. And we're on social media under all those places: Spectrograph Films and Dark Sanctuary.
Awesome. Timothy, thank you so much for coming out, and we look forward to seeing the film and seeing what you have next.
Yeah, thanks.
I'd like to thank Timothy Stevens for joining us. You can see Dark Sanctuary, the story of the church, on Amazon, Google, Apple TV, or just buy the damn thing. Links are in the show notes. You Belong to the Night by Joe Virus from the film soundtrack. Thank you again to the Mullen Music Project for their support. We've got a link for them in the show notes. Thank you to the Deep Ellum Community Center for letting us record their theme song, The Place to Be by Electric Ants. You can catch the Dallas Famous podcast every Sunday at 1 o'clock on Deep Ellum Radio, and then Wednesday on all the podcast platforms. Please like, subscribe, enjoy, share, all the good things. We'll see you next time.